Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Anime Macquarie 9th tournament, and it's the second round. I am Josh Benitez, and I'm joined by Jason, who just won this tournament. Say hi.
Hi everyone, great to be here.
Okay, so what we have here, we'll just introduce the two players on the sides right now. The guy on your left is Philip McKay. He's very well known on the Facebook community, especially foreign. He's the source of most Australian tier banter, and he has his own blog. He's also commentated here before, so check out his blog, this will be in a link below. And on the other hand is Mark Wan. He doesn't come up as much online. However, at locals, people literally call him a god. As far as I know, he is one of the first players in the Sydney area to actually pick up Weiss. Also, to those who might be relevant, he's also the reigning national champion for Vanguard. This is a very interesting matchup very early in the tournament. So, Jason, what do you expect out of this game?
So Josh, in this matchup, we see that it's a double two-level matchup, and you see on both sides in the tab in the bar above that it's both a Yami Mikan build for both of the players. So what this means is basically what we're going to be looking out for is which player is able to assemble the level 3 game within their hand, and more importantly, is able to pull that game off. Because in this matchup, having triple Mikan is actually more important than most of the other matchups because of the presence of the Darkness project, which allows a 2-level player to prevent damage dealt by a character, which of course is not really an issue if you have a triple Yami board which are untargetable, should you have a board of entirely Transformer Housework characters. So right now, we see a level 0 game, it's very simple, it's just a clock and draw, play one character and then go for the attack, but you can see here, Josh, that very early on, Mark does have a deviation from the standard deck list, and you see that he does run one, or at least right now, he does have one copy of the Little Witch Momo out on the board. What do you think about that?
It is something that I've seen in Euro decks. It's not what you see in traditional decks. It's mainly because it's off color, but it doesn't matter because this card generates a free plus. So essentially, when this card attacks, you mill one. If it's level 0 or lower, I believe, level 1 or 0, you essentially get a free card and get in the back row. So essentially, it's a free plus that your opponent can't do anything about. And if it's an assist or whatever you want, it's good. And generally, free mill is pretty good as well. So what we have here now, he just played his support, milling out his deck pretty quickly. Notice that he has about 30 cards in deck, and he hasn't gone through that many climaxes, so we'll probably see a stack later on, and then he proceeds to cancel. Now, what I tend to notice about Telovru is that most of their level 0 games generally weak. Most of their deck lists are just 2s or 3s of. It's mainly just text such as plussing or giving power, or just mainly the anti-salvage, which doesn't do much in this game, but does affect most of the current meta. What do you think about that?
That's certainly true, Josh, and you can see here that the board is very weak. It's a 1,000, 2,000 power characters. There's no beaters of any kind. What I do find interesting, however, is in Mark's list, he does run 2 of Welcome to Dreamworld Mayors, which are, if you're unfamiliar with the card, should the opponent, cancel the damage dealt by that card, you may elect to send it to stock. And more interestingly, Mark does run copies of the level 3 Nemesis, which does happen to give that particular mayor a soul should you choose to resonate with it. So I find that pretty interesting because it lets you push for damage, but it doesn't really punish you because you can, should the damage not go through, put it into stock. And of course, if the damage does go through, well, you have yourself a good situation.
And talk about it, he's explained the card to Philip, who doesn't look like he knows what much that card is. Most of Philip's deck list is mainly set 1. There's a little bit of set 2, but most of it's just like a replacement for Mikans at level 0, mainly like for power boosting. You can see right there, he just went right over Mark's board. Now he's at level 1. I didn't see much when the deck list came over. I didn't see much deviation to what he said. It's also something interesting to note. Mark actually doesn't run the climax for the level 3 in his deck. Mainly, so he just uses the text to boost him to power. So there's a maid level 0, which lets you a Katsuki, and then there's the aforementioned plus soul and cancel go to stock. You'll see it being played quite a few times here.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Josh, for a second, but just as clarification, what Josh meant by not running a level 3 climax, he does indeed refer to the level 3 Nemesis, not the level 3 Yami, of which Mark and Philip both are running 4 copies of in their decks.
I think it'll be kind of a weird deck list if they run Yami but no climax. It ruins the entire play.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
And there we go. Here we find the mischievous character herself.
Okay, so what we see here is that Mark is searching from a brainstorm, I believe, of 2 climaxes. But interestingly, he's searching for level 0 characters, even though he's a level 1. So what this is telling me is that, well, we can have a look maybe of his hand later on. What this does tell me is that Mark does have abundance of level 1 or level 2 characters, and that he's comfortable with where he is going into the later game, and now all he's looking for is having a better early game. And you can see here that he does play down the level 1 combo for the search, that is the sorting clothes Mikan, along with the 2 characters he just searched.
I think what he's trying to do here is also try to avoid getting reverse Mikan, because both players have the same character, which is on reverse search. It's like Shimakaze of sorts. So what I think he's hoping to do is to cancel, which he does, which removes that Maya from the board, allowing the Yami to run, which actually denies Philip McKay a free search. So in order to get 2 searches off the board, he has to commit 3.
That's very interesting, Josh. But what I do notice here is that Mark is himself searching with only 1 Mikan. He plays the climax combo immediately, not immediately, but he does play out the climax combo now. Whereas if he had chosen to wait maybe 1 or 2 turns more, maybe Philip would have committed more heavily onto the board, and then and Mark would get himself into an even better position than he is now. So what do you think about that?
I think it's mainly because maybe he doesn't have the 1-1 support to blow stuff over. So if he deploys a full board, it's most likely that the turn before Philip McKay has searched out his deck for all his counters, all his backplays, that when Mark has time to tide him over, he'll be prepared and will deny Mark his searches. So I think he's trying to take advantage of it now while there's some weak level 1, level 0 on the board, so he can get his free search and set up while he can.
That's a fair point. What I do want to draw attention to now is that right now Mark has 4 climaxes out of the deck, which means that he does have 4 of them inside his only 10 card deck. So what this is telling me is that Mark right now has a lot of climaxes in very few cards in his deck, and that's interesting because right now it's Philip's turn, which means that I think Mark is going to cancel quite a few times in this current turn. What do you think, Josh?
I believe he actually triggered 1. I think it's the second card from the top, from the bottom of the stock, top, bottom, whatever. So we still have about 3 climaxes and about 10 cards. So I'm assuming that Mark will expect to generally cancel. I don't think he'll expect to hit level 2 this turn. He'll probably end up with maybe 7 climaxes and refresh, which is a decent number. Now, looking over here at Philip's side, he's looking for cards to play. He was going to search out the Mikan, but he's turned it back and got the support instead. Now, I think that's what's trying to tell me, is that he's not going... He wanted to play them all, but, well, seeing that his board can move around, he can't do anything about it. Now, what's interesting is as soon as he grabbed the Mikan from clock, another one went back in. That means he has to search for another one from his deck, because if he can't search it from his deck, he probably doesn't have any in his hand.
Yep, okay, and so the other thing that I've noticed is that Philip, he seems to be quite behind on stock. He only has 1 stock at the moment, and then after this turn he will have 4 remaining. But then he is very close to level 2, so what this is telling me is that Philip is quite behind at the moment, both in terms of damage and his resources and on the board at the moment. So I'm expecting Philip to try and claw his way back into the game by playing down climaxes as often as he can to deal damage to Mark.
Well, he just played his event just to search out his deck. He does seem good for the refresh, though. He has 6 climaxes out, which means most likely, if he can he'll probably play the bar, which means there'll be 7 in there. I think he'll refresh really well after this, especially after searching and whatnot. He might take more damage because there's maybe not many climaxes on his deck after his refresh, but I think he'll be okay this turn.
Yep, so we'll see what happens now. Philip is taking his time with his turn, thinking about the optimal line of play. He has played down the 1-0 search Mikan in front of Mark's own 1-0 search Mikan, and with the Yami in the back row, I'm expecting Philip to play the climax, or the corresponding climax, and then giving that Mikan all the power she can get in order to overrun and get the search down. And you see here that Philip does play down a copy of Puchi Mikan. Now this card is interesting, Josh, because I remember on release, this card was worth, I don't know, maybe $3 or $4, and right now it's very, very expensive. So what this is telling me is that in the current metagame, 2-level players are valuing this sort of beaters on your own turn high power much, much more than they used to at one point. And if I remember from the deck list, Philip does play 2 copies of this while Mark only plays 1. So what do you think about that?
I think it's mainly just preference. I think what they're trying to aim for is just it's mainly if they need to beat something desperately that they can't beat over, such as generally like cost one cards that often get to 8 or 9k, so they can use that in the climax to beat it over. So generally, if they didn't have the Yami Chibi, they wouldn't be able to run it over well. Maybe you'll hit maybe about 9k with the Mikan giving that boost, but you don't have the boost on the other lanes, which well, maybe on the other lanes they'll have the early clone, which is 500 for each other, so on attack it's maybe 8, 7, 8k, which is okay, but sometimes when there's a really annoying stuff on the board, you may need to get a little bit more than that.
Fair enough, fair enough. And we can see here that this point directly reflects what we were talking about earlier, which is that Two-Lover generally has a very weak early game compared to many other decks. So much so that they're forced to resort to a character such as this Puchiyami, which is power on own turn, which I think generally most people consider to be not the most optimal of cards that you want at a level 1 game. Maybe you want an encore, maybe you want costless, but the thing is, generally power on own turn isn't really something people value heavily in a metagame.
Mainly because when it comes to your opponent's turn, and they're going to bash you with their sticks, and if they have advantage combos like Hibiki, Shimakaze, and all that kind of stuff, Mikan, you're going to get wrecked unless you have a counter, which Philip does search, so he's anticipating that Mark will try to run him over next turn.
Yep, definitely. And, well, nothing much is happening right now. Philip just searched, and now he's continuing to beat down Mark with the rest of the characters. And we do notice that Mark did not cancel with their very first Mikan. So what that means is his deck is now very compressed, and I do expect him to cancel both this one and the next attack.
And he cancels that one, there you go.
There's the first cancel, and the second one, and there's a cancel there.
Just the last one as well, not bad. So he'll draw. Now, what's interesting here is he's on 1-6. So he has 6 climaxes in deck, and he has to think. Now, people generally want to refresh with as many cards in clock as you can. This is mainly because when you refresh, those cards don't go back in. It's like a bonus compression round, as some people like to call it. So often, if he clocks, he draws 2. So he gains advantage, but he loses compression, so to speak. So he's more likely to eat damage. So I think he's thinking whether to clock or not. So it's 6 climaxes. It's an okay. It's not the best, but it's okay. Maybe clocking will do a bit more. What do you think he'll do?
Well, so here, I think Mark is going to elect to not clock, because what I see here is that the climax he did draw was kind times the climax necessary for the Yami combo. So, as a two-level player, generally, at this point, I generally like to keep one climax in my hand at all times, because of the fact that the deck is so weak early on, it does need to, or want to push damage at certain points in the game that other decks generally might not want to. So what this means is, you generally want a climax in hand ready to play, in order to push for damage, and we do see that Mark does elect to not go for the clock on the climax. He does clock on normal card, which means that he is going to have 6 climaxes backing his deck during the refresh. So like I was saying, I think Mark wants to hold on to the climax in order to prepare for a push later on, should he choose to do so. And of course, if he elects to not do the push, that means he's guaranteed to have the Yami go off with the climax in hand, because the most frustrating thing that you can possibly have is have 3 Yamis and then not draw the climax. It's just a terrible feeling, because the Yamis themselves are, well, quite weak.
Because I remember I saw a game at Locals where this guy had 3 Yamis and a Maya and a Mikan, and he drew at least 6, a ridiculous amount of cards, but he didn't get the climax, and when he milled with the Mikan after everything, the climax went out. It was like, oh my god, what the hell?
Yes,
so now you see here, the deck refresh was around 18%, so you have 6 cards, 6 climaxes in the deck, which is okay. Base refresh, the compression ratio is about 16 if you have 8 and 50, so it's better than you start the game with, but it's not ideal. Now, if you look at his deck list, he only runs 1 copy, which I believe is a 2-1 changer into the Mikan. What do you think?
Sorry?
It's the changer. What do you think about that?
Well, that's very interesting, Josh, because not only is it a changer, it's also a level support for House 1 and Transform characters. Now, level supports are often very good characters to have, simply because it makes your level 3 game stronger. And the thing is, in Two-Lover, there's actually very few level 2 characters which are really playable, to be honest. One of the playable characters is a level 3 beta, so what that means is it gets extra power when it attacks into level 3 characters at level 2. Another viable level 2 character is the Resonance Yami, which is on reverse. You may pay 1 to draw a card if you resonate with the level 3. But both of those options are, to be honest, not something Two-Lover will be really looking for, because, like I said, what is important to level is getting to your end game, and end game in this deck takes quite a lot of stock. 6 stock on top, along with any other supports you want to play in the back, any events you want to play in the back, and so on and so forth. And you can see here that Mark only has 4 stock. Now, after this round, he will have 7 total. So what that means is he's going to get to play 3 Yamis and a Brainstorm should he choose so, if he hits level 3 at this point. So having costed characters is not something that you really want at this point in the game. And you see Mark recently, he plays down all costless characters. Granted, he doesn't have many cost 1 characters in his deck, but the point still stands.
Now, he is trying to search out his deck now. Like, he just looked for the level 3 climax. Not the climax, Yami herself. So that means he's trying to set up, getting ready to burn his opponent as soon as he gets to level 3. So he's starting to set up now. I think he's probably expecting to maybe hit level 3 in about 1 or 2 turns. So now is the best time to start getting the 2 or 3 Yamis where you just draw into whatever you need.
Yep, and right now this attack is very important for Mark because we see he does play down the climax that he's been holding on since the last refresh, and he's doing this because you can see here that Philip only has 1 climax potentially left in his deck out of 9 cards. So what that means is Philip can cancel 1 attack at most, and the rest he's going to be taking as damage. So Mark is making a heavy push this turn to try and get Philip up to level 3, and you can see here that 2 attacks have gone through. The last one, we'll have a look, is it going to go through or not? I think he's going to, Josh, because I think he's holding the last climax, but I may be wrong.
Oh well, he
no,
isn't.
I lied. He cancels. So I think this is the best possible scenario for Philip. If he had not cancelled, he will be, I think, in a far more precarious scenario than he would be wanting to be.
Well, it's his turn now. Now he's deciding whether the clock will draw. Well, he probably will. There's not many cards in clock, and his hand's actually really low for a Yami deck. Yami decks tend to always somehow have a magical power to just have a maximum hand wherever they want. You have so many plussing and filtering options that it's not even funny. So he being on 4 or 5 hand and starting a turn isn't great, but it's something that he can recover from. So what do you think about that?
Oh, that's definitely true. And the big reason why Yami decks tend to just generate hand out of nowhere is because of the level 1 Mikan combo, which in this game, it's not something that we've seen a very good example of because both players have searched 1 card off of it each. So generally what you want is search 3, play 3 Mikan, search 3 off the 1 climax, but here both players have only searched 1. Now the reason why Mark's hand seems to be so much bigger is because you can see in his current back row, he does have the miniskirt Nemesis, which is a powerful advantage engine for the deck. Now for those of you that don't know what it does, it's during the beginning of your climax phase, I believe, you may elect to pay 1 stock. If you do so, you can look up to the top 4 cards of your deck and take a you may take a transform or Dango character, if I remember correctly. So what this means is Mark can, well, with pretty much impunity, elect to play out his hand and always know that in the back of his pocket, he does have a way to get back cards in the form of that Nemesis. Whereas Philip, you can see right now, very traditional Brainstorm, hand uncle in the back row, he doesn't have a way to get extra cards in his deck unless he hits the Brainstorm. So I think that's the big reason why right now Mark's hand is so much better.
Now, you see Philip here, he's refreshing is really well. He refreshed 8 cards and 8 climaxes in his deck. His compression ratio is much higher than Mark's, mainly because he's got his deck, they're both about the same size, but the differences between the climaxes is interesting. So maybe just that 1 or 2 climaxes is a massive indicator of how compressed you are. So he just refreshed his climax and now we're trying to mill more. He gets a search for 1. Now, what do you think he'll search for? He's at level 2. Do you think he'll search for something to play, or do you think he'll search for something to go for his end?
That's a very good question, Josh, but I think with 5 hand, he does have sufficient cards to leverage his game plan until level 3, especially because he's at level 2 with 4 damage in his clock. I think that Mark can easily deal at least 2 damage to Philip. If Mark does deal 2 damage, then Philip can simply clock to reach level 3, at which point it all becomes the Yami game. I think he'll search for a Yami just in preparation of that, just because of how important it is to have that game plan. But of course, he can elect to search for another, maybe another Pucci Mikan to leverage his game plan right now and have a better board right now if he thinks he's going to cancel very well.
Well, he's still taking his time to think. I think he might actually get something to play in the board. His hand is not the greatest, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Still trying to think around it, I guess.
Yep.
Now,
so there's one thing I want to draw attention to, and that's the presence of the Darkness Plat. So that's a card you can see in Philip's clock right now, the second from the bottom in his clock. Now, Darkness Plat is one of the more infamous cards in Tula Root because it is what people generally call a money counter. That is, if you elect to play it, you can choose one of your opponent's battling characters and it doesn't do damage for the turn. Now, this is good for a variety of reasons. Obviously, first, you don't take damage. But additionally, you don't take any burns, you don't take any, any sort of other damage effect might be associated with combat. So what this means is for both players, if they have the Darkness Plan in hand, you can generally expect to take less damage than you otherwise would. Now, like we said before, this is less of a factor in two level mirror matchups because of the fact that Yami is untargetable. So that means Darkness Plan can't affect them because he has to choose a battling character. And you can see here that Philip McKay does search a level 1 character. But back to Darkness Plan, so it's interesting to note that I can see that Philip does have a Darkness project in his hand. So maybe he's thinking that Mark might not have 3 Yamis. What do you think about that, Josh?
Well, I think it's more so a race to get to level 3 first. Essentially, the first level player who gets to level 3 can instantly get their 3 armies out and deny their opponent to, oh, by the way, Darkness Plan, boom, you're gone, right? So I think he's maybe trying to gamble, but I think at this point, it's better safe than sorry, you may as well at least have one. You can't discount him playing a Mikan to heal instead, so it's not a bad play to keep one in hand in a matchup like this.
Yep, that's true. We do see here that the damage ratio is going pretty evenly. Mark is at 2-5, so Philip does trigger a second climax. So what this means is that Philip McKay does have 4 climaxes minimum out of his deck. He has 1 in his clock, 2 in his hand, both bars, and the fourth one, out is the wind trigger in his waiting room. Now, of course, what this means is that Philip could potentially take a lot of damage right now, unless, of course, his climax is at the top of his deck. Now, we can see here that Mark also himself drew a Darkness Plan. So, unlike Philip, I think Mark might be able to leverage his Darkness Plan a bit more than Philip, simply because he drew it later. Philip had to be holding a Darkness Plan for quite a long time, whereas Mark just drew his, which means that Mark's been having a lot more options than Philip for quite a large portion of this game. So, do you think that's going to change anything here, Josh?
Probably. It's mainly your hands more flexible. Mainly, it's just a matter of timing whether you want to search it out early or grab your key cards early or not. With Darkness Plan, it's an event. You can't really search for it. I think he just discarded 1. I think at the start of his turn, he actually had 2 because he had 1 in his hand and then he drew another one. He just discarded it with the Mikan right there. Now, I think... What was he trying to search for again?
He was brainstorming. I think Philip was just asking for how many climaxes are in.
So he's about 4 climaxes and 6 cards in deck. I think what Mark is trying to do right now is trying to mill out all the climaxes out of his deck so that he can refresh better than he did last time. So he does have the Resonance in his hand, which means when he attacks he'll also mill out more, which means he'll probably try to ensure that he'll probably play like a climax. He has a climax in hand. He'll probably try to play that this turn as well. He'll probably use the Resonance to mill out to 4 or 5 cards in deck so that when he ends his turn he has only 1 card left in his deck, which means the climax that he plays goes back into the deck when he refreshes.
Okay, and we see here that Mark plays a level 0 Maya, so what this is telling me that he's going to go for more damage game. So a lot of players, what they want to do in a mirror matchup for 2 level, a lot of them will try and keep the opponent at level 2 with 5 damage in their clock. So what that means is they want to reach level 3 first to leverage their Yami plan. Now Mark, he doesn't look like he's doing that. He's going to go all the way. Yep, there you can see. Oh no, sorry, he's using the Resonance on the Nemesis to get cards, my mistake. But what this means is that it's likely that Mark is going to leverage damage. He's going to attack with the Maya with the frontal attack, and then he's going to Resonance with the Nemesis to give extra souls. So he wants to go for damage. He doesn't care about getting to level 3 first. He wants the damage game here, and he wants it now.
What I find funny is that he's trying to mill out that last climax, and when he hit his 3rd card, he saw no climaxes. So he's probably going to trigger 1. So he was thinking, he was counting his deck, like, do I have enough climaxes here? What do I have left in my deck? So he went for more, and he got his level 3 Yami, which is the second one he searched, so the second or third one he searched this game, which means he's really well prepared for his end.
Yep, okay, but the issue we do see here is that Mark has 2 cards left in his deck, but only 5 climaxes within his waiting room. So what this means is that unless Mark does something to get climaxes in the waiting room, he's going to be refreshing with only 5 climaxes, which I think is going to be a big deal right now, Josh, because I can't tell how many cards he's going back in, but I don't know, I feel like 5 climaxes might be too few to be comfortable.
Like, generally, 5 climaxes, especially in a Yami matchup where you want to cancel, especially against the multiple burns that they like to have, it's not the most ideal situation. I think Mark's just trying to get as much as he can. He is ahead of his opponent in terms of resources, but in terms of compression, he's far behind. So his second refresh, even though note that it's less climaxes than his last one. It's better purely because he has more cards out. So it is not that great, but it's better than the position he was at his first refresh.
That's fair enough. And we see here that very importantly, he triggers a 2-soul on that push with the Mekon. So this is going through for, I believe it's 4 damage, unless he sided.
He did side.
He sided? Okay.
He knew he was on one climax left, and so he's like, I can deal extra damage. I don't need to lose this character. He knows he's going to take more damage, so he's just going to leave it on there just to absorb that extra 1 soul that would have been if it was a direct attack. And you see Philip is comfortably cancelling, even though he's pretty dead out of climaxes at this point.
But I think that's fine, you know, when you cancel, if you cancel the big attacks and take the small ones, that's always a win because you're not taking more damage. Interesting to note right now is that Philip is at 3-5. Sorry, not 3-5, 2-5. So like we mentioned before, this means that Philip is locked out of getting to level 3 in this turn, I think. With the Brainstorm, that means he's going to have 11 cards back in the deck, and 2 level doesn't have an Akatsuki, which means that he's unable to mill through his deck in time to play his Yamis. So what this means is Mark is going to be ahead going to level 3 game with 3 Yamis or 2 Yamis or however many he may have, and Philip won't be able to do much about that because they are untargetable. What I do find interesting here is that Philip has very few stock. He only has 4 stock, and if he uses any more for, during this turn, he's going to be in a pretty rough scenario when he heads into level 3. I don't think he's going to, so he'll probably have 7 stock by the end of the turn. But I don't know, Josh. I think Philip is having a bit of issue here. With
I think the main problem with him right now is trying to get rid of those bars he triggered.
Yeah.
They're still in his hand. I think what he'll try to do is try to use hand... Like, what would be ideal is that he couldn't search off the Mekon there, so he might try to overflow his hand. But it looks like instead he's playing... he plays the Mekon to filter out the clock, so he'll probably discard the other climax here. Yep. And then he'll play one more from his hand, which means he'll be able to get rid of them enough. So he'll only mill out maybe 4 cards from his deck because he can't Akatsuki.
Yep.
So 3 attacks plus 1 search. And maybe if he triggers another bar, 1 more. But he'll get those climaxes out of his hand. But I don't think the one in his clock will go anywhere soon.
That's true, but it is very damaging to having I think it's very damaging that you have to use your hand this way. You know, you're not leveraging your hand against your opponent, you're using it against yourself. Trying to get rid of climaxes in your hand, it's always a very painful process, but I think Philip made the right decision here. Yeah.
Well, he does take his time thinking about what his moves are. Like, what I've noticed while doing the editing for this video, he does take a lot of time thinking about what he wants to do. I think now he's going to... he's brainstorming. Okay, he's actually going to mill now. He searches... Oh, that's a climax. So he searches 1. Now, that means he brings the deck down to 5. I think those are all characters, which means he won't be triggering a bar. He actually knows what he'll trigger now as well. And if he searches with the Mekon, he'll be able to control what he triggers next. And
that's true, but what is a little bit concerning is that if his deck is indeed full of only characters, that means there are 3 climaxes not back in his waiting room. Now we know 1's in his hand, 1 is in his clock, so what that means is there's 1 climax that we haven't accounted for. Now it could be in his hand, or it could be in his stock. Now I think it's a big issue if it's in his stock, because that means, you know, he's not going to have clean stock, he's going to be cancelling less often. Now, I think it's not in his hand, so yeah, that means it's probably in his stock. And that's probably as a result of the blind stock from his earlier triggers of the bar. So I wonder what he's going to do with that. It looks like he's not going to do much about it. He plays a 1-0 Mekon, and yeah, he's just going to go for climax. I'm going to ignore the climax in my stock. I'm too close to refresh, and I think 6 climaxes in is sufficient to give me a good compression rate, so he's just going to go for it. He deals 2 to Mark. Now, the thing is, this is a big push, because for Philip, he is able to deal, I think, he's able to deal 7 damage here without triggers from the extra soul gained by the direct on the Puchiyami. Now, if Mark doesn't cancel, he's dead. Now, like we said before, he's probably going to, but this is a very scary situation for him to be in. So, Josh, do you think he's going to leverage the Darkness plan right now, or is he just going to believe that his deck can cancel?
I think he's just going to hope that he cancels, which he just
yep,
did.
He does. Okay, that's
he's
fine.
about, there's only about 5 climaxes left. Well, maybe, there's not that many, but still, there's still a decent amount of climaxes still around, so I think he'll survive, which he does.
But I don't think this is the ideal scenario. He took 4 damage during that turn at level 3 game, while Philip is only at, like we said, at 2-5. So I think now he's probably going to go for the kill. He's going to play 3 Yamis, and he's going to see if he can kill Philip McKay this turn, because I think he can't really wait. He can't afford to wait any longer. If he waits any longer, Philip will have his own Yamis, and they're going to do the killing blow with only 3 damage left to kill Mark.
Now, Mark, I think he's going to do that as well, trying to mill down the deck as well, trying to ensure that his climaxes are back in for his refresh. Now, he plays down, I think he'll play down 3, he does. He plays 3 this turn, so he's going to be like, I'm going to go in or go home.
Yep.
Even though Philip McKay's sitting at a very comfortable damage advantage over Mark. Mark was just like, he needs to go now or he's going to lose it.
Yep. And more interestingly is that he's actually not as far behind, I think, as one might expect, because Philip does have 1 card left in his deck and only 6 climaxes. So it's unlikely to cancel this attack, and he's going to take a refresh point, so this is going to be very detrimental. We see here that Philip does have an even better compression rate than he did last time, but the most important thing to note here is that even though it's a good compression rate, he still only has 6 climaxes back in. Now, this means that it's impossible for him to cancel every single point of burn, but I think what Philip is looking for here is to cancel the attacks from Yami and then take the burns. And I think, yeah, that's what Philip's looking for. He does have 6 stock, which means that he's going to be going into his own level 3 game, looking to play down the Yamis.
But thing is, what I've noticed is that he hasn't actually searched for them as much as Mark has.
He definitely hasn't.
Most of Philip's searches are just for stuff he can play right now. So he has to either have them in his hand or hope to God he draws into them. Now, that's kind of risky. Would you be comfortable going as to Loveru in a mirror match with maybe just 1 in your hand?
Most definitely not, Josh. And you can see that Philip does cancel. He's going to take the refresh. He's going to take the burn and then take the refresh point now. Yeah, definitely. Going back to your point, definitely having only 1 Yami in your hand is not something I want. Yeah, so in a lot of games that I have seen people play with Loveru, what they tend to do is they search out the Yamis with a level 1 Mikan combo. They don't look for any other level 1 game. They go for the Yamis and they hold them in their hand. They say, this is what I want. I'm going to have this, and then I don't care how bad my early game is. If I have this for my late game, it's going to work for me. And you see here that Philip does refresh a climax. Oh, sorry, not refresh.
He levels up a climax. So I think Philip is signaling here is like, I'm going to have to kill him this turn. And if I don't kill him this turn, I'm done. So I think Philip is like, he believes he's confident enough that he'll be able to run him over. He only needs to deal 3 damage. So he's like, you know what, stuff it, I'll just chuck a climax here. I'm probably going to be okay. I don't think I'll refresh it for it enough to matter. So I think that's what he's going for here, which is interesting. Now, let's see what... This might be his final turn.
We see there's 2 Yamis he had, so he's probably going to play those out. He clocks a climax, so that means this is the point of no return. There's nothing else he can do now. He's going to play the Yamis, he's going to go for the damage. Yep, he plays out the Yami, draws to discard 1, and then he's going for the second one. And I think right now, all he's hoping for is if he can draw, he wants to draw into the 3rd Yami, so that he can have the most amount of damage possible. And what Mark is going to be hoping is he wants to cancel, Philip wants to do the damage. We're going to see who's coming out on top here.
Now,
and, yep.
Ooh, he plays a Mikan, which I think at this point means he has no more other Yamis in his hand. Now, he doesn't. So he's just hoping for the heal right now.
Oh, my mistake.
Now, the problem with this is Mark definitely has the Darkness Land in his hand at this point. Now, what he has to believe is that he has to ensure that he does enough damage with the Yami and maybe 1 Mikan to ensure that that's enough damage to go through. Because if he has to rely on his 3rd attack to deal the damage, Mark will say, hey, here's Darkness Project, you're not going to win this game. Now, it's interesting to note, he played the Mikan, the sitting one, and he milled a Yami, which means if he played the Mikan first, he would have drawn into it. But then, not knowing what it is, it's only something you can say in hindsight. You can't do much about it.
And what we notice is that Philip attacks with the Mikan first. He's going for the 3 damage first because he wants to bait Mark into using the Darkness plan right now. Mark doesn't do it, he cancels. So what this means is this attack is important. He's going for 3 damage, Philip is, and Mark, he's got to cancel this one or he's dead. And he does cancel with the last card. So what this means is that Mark is in a comfortable position. He's at 3-5, and now Philip is going into the last attack of his possible game with just a Mikan. So what this means is the Darkness Plan is active. If Mark does have it, it's very likely Philip would just lose the game outright, because if Mark has another climax with the Yamis, that's game. If he doesn't, he's still in good position still, with 3 attacks of 2 souls to go, with Philip only needing 4 damage to die.
What I found interesting is that he looked at his blind stock, which is technically illegal. He also rolled a dice. So I think what he's going to do is that if he can't kill him with the burn and the refresh, I think he might... Oh, he cancelled. I think he might concede if he knows he has Darkness Project.
I think the game's over at this point. Mark does have a Darkness plan, and yeah, if he shows Philip the game and he picks up the cards, it's game.
So, what do you think of that matchup? What do you think would have happened? What do you think could have improved on either side?
Well, like we mentioned at the very beginning of this game, it's most important if you have 3 Yamis in this matchup because having the Yamis not only is the damage, it's also the fact that it denies the opponent the opportunity to use a Darkness Plan. You can see here that Philip at the end of the game, he had 2 Darkness Plans in his hand, but he couldn't use it. He couldn't leverage it. Mark had 3 Yamis out. They're untargetable. You can't leverage the Darkness Plans against that. Whereas on the other hand, Mark, he was close to death. Yeah, Philip, he had the Yamis. He had 1 Yami, but he had 2 Mikons, but I think the Mikons really weighed him down, you know. With the Mikons there, Mark was able to use the Darkness Plan, he was able to cancel the damage, and he was able to just negate the last attack, and I think that's what won him the game.
Yeah, I think if Philip searched out for his level 3s later, he would have been able to negate that counter at the end. He would have been able to win because Mark wouldn't be able to say, hey, here's Darkness Plan, you're done. Anyway, that is the video. The game is over. We'll be back with more. We'll have different commentators on each round. Thank you guys for watching and staying for this so long. And shout out to our sponsors on Mocha, who are in Cabramatta, and also the official distributors of the game was Animart. Thank you so much for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.